Carl sat on his couch, glancing between his phone and the ceiling, wrestling with the decision of whether to move 10,000 miles away to Australia. This move would mean leaving behind his home, girlfriend, family, friends, job, and entire life. The chance arose when his best friend Novak announced he was relocating to Australia with his girlfriend. At 27, Novak was experiencing a quarter-life crisis and wanted to start fresh while he still felt young. Moving to Australia had been a shared dream since childhood when their families vacationed there. They both felt a unique connection to the country's colors, architecture, people, and atmosphere. Over the years, they visited several times, and at 15, they agreed to move there someday and start a business together. That dream, however, had gradually faded under the weight of reality. Carl pursued accounting at college in Boston and landed a promising job immediately after graduation through a professor's connection. Novak, meanwhile, worked at a local tech startup thanks to a family contact. But after 4 years, the company was acquired and he was laid off. Receiving a generous severance package, Novak decided to take a bold step starting a business in Australia with his girlfriend, who was supportive and adventurous. Their plan was to launch an eco-friendly agri-tech company leveraging Australia's farming sector and demand for locally grown organic food. 1 month later, Novak informed Carl that he and his girlfriend were moving soon and invited Carl to join them. He showed Carl a beta website and app for the business, explaining his and his girlfriend's complementary skills, she in logistics, he in business and technology. Novak wanted Carl as a partner, assigning him responsibilities like sales, marketing, outreach, budgeting, and finances. He reminded Carl of their childhood dream, emphasizing how difficult it would be to pursue it later. Novak also disparaged the idea of Carl staying in Boston's corporate world, questioning if that was truly what he wanted. He highlighted the potential positive impact of their business, helping families in need and promoting sustainability. Carl agreed to consider it and asked for a few days. During the next day, Carl weighed the decision carefully. His mother had died 2 years earlier, leaving him close to his father, who was struggling emotionally. Carl worried that leaving would deeply affect his father, especially since his brother had a strained relationship with him. Carl also thought about Stephanie, his girlfriend of just over a year with whom he had already pictured a future. He knew a long-distance relationship would be difficult and that he couldn't expect her to move with him. He reflected on his friends and family, realizing relationships might fade with distance. His current job offered stability, benefits, and financial growth, but was also monotonous and uninspiring. Carl never envisioned himself in this path. He always dreamed of building something meaningful. He also disliked Boston and had always imagined living in the countryside, specifically Australia. At 27, Carl felt the urge to create his own life while still young. He wondered how he could refuse this chance to pursue his dream with his best friend. For 3 days, Carl obsessed over the choice, alternating between the pros and cons of each path. By the 4th day, he was no closer to a decision. Both options were vastly different with unknown outcomes, making the choice feel impossible. He had kept the situation private initially, but now sought advice. Over 2 days, he consulted his father, girlfriend, 2 close friends, and his aunt. Their opinions varied. His dad and 1 friend encouraged him to go. His aunt and other friend urged him to stay. Stephanie couldn't give a clear answer, but her tears conveyed her feelings. Each offered logical reasons, yet Carl remained uncertain. He was puzzled by how opposing advice all seemed valid. On the 6th night, Carl went for a walk around the city to clear his mind. He wandered late into the night, eventually sitting alone on a bench by the harbor. There, he contemplated how this one decision held the power to reshape his entire future, yet he had no certainty about the right choice. The inability to foresee consequences felt overwhelming, like driving blindfolded. He wished he could see how each option would play out. As he stared at the stars reflected on the water, an elderly man suddenly sat nearby, surprising Carl. Curious about the man's presence so late and alone, Carl asked if he was all right. The man assured him he was fine and remarked on the beautiful night. After a pause, Carl shared his dilemma and asked the man's opinion. The man chuckled, understanding Carl's confusion, and suggested a curious solution. Let him decide, as if flipping a coin with a brain. Carl, desperate to end his uncertainty, agreed. The man paused briefly, then declared, "All right, you're going." When Carl asked why, the man smiled and said, "I guess you'll have to find that out." After a moment, Carl stood to thank him, but the man had vanished. 5 weeks later, Carl boarded a plane with Novak and his girlfriend, heading to Australia. Over the next 20 years, Carl made Australia his home. Although he and Stephanie broke up within months of their long-distance attempt, Carl later met Natalie, fell in love, and married her. They have 2 boys, providing him with love and purpose. The eco-friendly business ran for 6 years before industry shifts and regulations forced its closure. During that time, Carl developed a strong passion for farming. A year later, he bought an indoor farm and started a small personal farming business. It became profitable, but remained modest in income. Financial strain and differing personalities caused tension between Carl and Natalie, who stayed together for their children despite unhappiness. Carl and Novak stayed close, maintaining a small circle of friends. Carl takes pride in contributing to sustainable local food, but struggles with ongoing stress and financial pressure. As years pass, Carl visited home less often, usually at holidays until the last visit, which was for his father's funeral. At the service, surrounded by family and old friends, Carl felt overwhelmed and left to get fresh air. At a nearby bar, he unexpectedly saw Stephanie. Their reunion was unexpectedly comforting, and they parted with a warm farewell. Sitting alone, Carl reflected on his choice to leave Boston. He felt a strange regret, wondering if he had made the wrong decision and how a stranger's advice had influenced his life so deeply. Later that night, Carl walked the city harbor alone, eventually resting on the same bench by the water. As he closed his eyes to breathe deeply, an old man tapped his shoulder. Startled awake, Carl told him he was fine and had simply fallen asleep. The man warned about the dangers of sleeping alone there. Carl explained his restless nights spent wrestling with his decision to move to Australia. They spoke, and Carl asked the man's opinion again. The man laughed softly and proposed the same coin flip idea with a brain. Carl, feeling déjà vu, agreed once more. The man paused, then said, "All right, you're staying." When Carl asked why, the man replied, "I guess you'll have to find that out." 5 weeks later, Novak left for Australia, while Carl stayed in Boston. Over the next 20 years, Carl advanced to chief financial officer of a mid-sized company, earning a high salary. He married Stephanie, and they chose not to have children. Their relationship grew stronger, with its own ups and downs. And Carl remained close to his father. Although many friends drifted away, Carl and Novak saw each other occasionally. Despite financial stability, Carl never enjoyed his job, finding it bureaucratic and unfulfilling. He often felt bored, isolated, and ambivalent about his life. On his 48th birthday, Novak flew in for a visit, sharing stories of his family and business success in Australia. Novak expressed pride in the company's impact and regret that Carl hadn't joined him. That night, Carl walked alone, moderately intoxicated, to the harbor bench. Looking up at the stars, he closed his eyes and breathed deeply. Suddenly, an old man tapped his shoulder again. Carl woke to the man's concerned question, explaining he had just fallen asleep. The man warned him about the risks of sleeping alone there. Carl shared his ongoing struggle with the decision he faced years ago.